gives away what the I am statement is this week. Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. Hey, if we haven't met, I'm Troy. I'm the pastor here. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. And I want to say hello to those that tune in online. I know about 4 people that are deliberately tuning in online today because they can't be here due to sickness and injury, and we look forward to them being back again. So those folks out there online, welcome. We're glad you're here too, even if it's virtually. So we know they're out there. So we're in this series I call Who is Jesus? And it's basically, who does he say he is? Many people will say, oh, I forgot to dismiss the kiddos. Bible Builders is happening. I think he's already back there. So we have Lego Church, where kids get to play with Legos and learn about Jesus, and it's really fun. I don't know if you know this, but one day someone left a bunch of Legos on the doorstep of the church, and then we added to it a little bit. We have about 5,000 Legos at the church. And so this is the church where you might step on a Lego. You know that's worse than sand spurs. But we want kids to be welcome here and use that as a hook, basically, to introduce them to Jesus and Bible stories. So they seem to love it, and I like Legos too. But back to what I was saying. Who is Jesus? Who does he say he is? I told you early on there's a thing called the trilemma, where some would say he's a lunatic or a liar or he's Lord. Well, we believe 100% he is Lord. He is not crazy, and he's not a liar. He is Lord. He's Lord of our lives. We say that every Sunday, every time we're here, Jesus is Lord, without a doubt, and that's what we live by. But who is Jesus, and who did he say he was? The first week he said that I am the bread of life. Jesus is the bread of life that came down from heaven to give us life. And they asked him, what must we do to get this bread? And he said, believe. Believe, and you will get the bread of life, and you can live. And then he said, I am the light of the world. In him is light and life. How awesome is that? The light of the world. In him is light and life. And then he said, I am the gate, and all who enter the gate will be saved. And you enter into the sheepfold, the flock, and you go in and out and find green pastures. He's a great shepherd, because that's the next one. He says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd, look at this, lays down his life for the sheep. And we saw a little video last week where the shepherd was getting the sheep out of the ditch, and one of the shepherds even got in the ditch to get the sheep out. Our good shepherd takes care of us similarly, will get us out of those ditches, and will lay down his life. He did lay down his life for us. Jesus laid down his life for us, that we would have life abundantly. And he loves us so much, and he'll get us out of ditches. So to this week is Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. And we'll get to that here in just a moment. But before we get there, let me share a couple of events that have happened in my life that kind of will relate to what Jesus is going to do in this passage that we're looking here today. And maybe you can relate to them too. So most of us have friends and family, right? If you don't have a friend, I'm your friend. I'll be your friend if you need one. But most of us have friends and family, acquaintances, people we know and love, and people we would do great things for no matter what they ask. And the church family is that way too. I told the crowd last night that we really mean it. If you can't be at church and we ask you, is there anything you need? We mean that. You know, if we can feed you, we can take something to you, we're going to do that. Don't sit at home without. And your church family's here. We will minister to you and take care of you. So don't just discount that when we say, do you need anything? Well, you might. Let us know. We'll get it to you. But we have family and friends that we do that too. And we will travel great distances to be with them, especially in times of trouble or a time of a death. So one of the events that happened in my life is, I've told you before, we moved to Florida in 1978, got here on my birthday, sunshiny day just like it is today. And I thought, man, we're in paradise. I am 100% Floridian, even though I wasn't born here. I claim that. But after a few weeks we were here, my great uncle had passed away, Uncle Dewey, and us kids called him Uncle Doo-Doo, which is probably not the best nickname for him, but Dewey, he passed away. So we'd only been to Florida for a couple weeks, and you know what we did? He passed away, so we went back to be with the family, to go back and mourn with those who mourn. You know we're to do that. And you've probably done that already in your life at least once. If you've been around any length of time, you've mourned with someone who mourned. So we went back to be with the family and lay him to rest and close that chapter of his life and in our life. And just we stopped what we were doing, up in the car, and went back to Ohio. Another time, a friend of mine was, a different friend, this was my uncle we were talking about here, but a friend of mine was renting a house. And he was out inspecting the house to rent it. And while he was in the house to rent it, lightning struck it. And like, wow. For me, I'm thinking I'm not renting that house if lightning struck the house. But so they're in the house, lightning struck the house, and the person showing them around says, I think we should look in the attic and see if there's any fire or anything. So my friend, who knows absolutely nothing about how a house is built because he's a lawyer, and thankfully he knows the law, but he knows nothing about how a house is built, climbed up the little ladder. You know, you have that ladder in the garage, it comes down and flips out, and it's real kind of rickety, and he climbed up that ladder, stepped off the ladder, and fell out of the attic onto the concrete floor and broke his back. And like, oh my goodness, we did not realize how bad it was. You know, we heard okay, he's going to be okay, but then, no, you need to get up here. So we left where we live now and drove to Jacksonville to be with him because he's going to have some major surgery. He's possibly going to be paralyzed. And I remember going up to the emergency room up there in Jacksonville, and by the time we got there, the whole church was there. The waiting room was full of people that I knew, that knew him. They were there to comfort his wife and his son and to pray for him. And I never will forget going into the room where he was at, and our pastor at the time, Alan, and I went in there, and he's mobilized on this bed, and we served him communion because he might not make it. And if he does make it, he may not walk again. But prayer, I mean, you talk about prayer happening. There was prayer happening that day. He survived the fall. He's been here in this church. You guys have met him. He walks today. He has a lot of hardware in him. But we do that. If that happens in your life, someone gets injured, they're in the hospital, what do? You drop what you're doing and you go there to be with them, to pray with them, and to minister to them and to comfort them with whatever comfort God blesses you with and able to comfort them. But we go do that. Another time, a friend of mine sent me a message and said, when are you coming out to see me? We'd gotten separated for a couple of years, hadn't been able to communicate. And I said, well, I think I can come out in June. This is a few years ago. And he goes, no, I think you need to come sooner. And I knew he had some health problems. And I hear in his voice, you need to come sooner. And what are you thinking? Like, oh, no, it's worse than we think. So this is in the height of COVID, and I did not want to fly until that was over. And I said, I'll come out and see you, but I could bring the virus out there and kill you because his immune system was compromised. He says, no, come. So I'm thinking I'm going out there for him to tell me that he's just got a short time left. A great friend I've known 30-some years. Come to find out he was sick, but it wasn't as bad as we thought. He's well today, cancer-free. We had prayed for him on the Wednesday or the Tuesday morning group. And I love it when doctors do this because he went to his first cancer treatment, and the doctor came back the next week and said, it's like a miracle. Well, no, it's not like a miracle. It is a miracle. The tumors have shrunk till they were almost disappeared. He's cancer-free today through the treatment, miracle of medicine, and prayer. But I dropped what I was doing, got on an airplane. I got the window seat, and I'm sticking to that window seat because the people next to me are coughing, and I'm thinking I'm going to die, But I did what I had to do and what I knew was the right thing to do, to go out there and comfort him, spend a week with him, reminiscing, cheering him up. And we talk to each other on the phone occasionally, and Valerie just laughs. She goes, I just love hearing you guys talk on the phone because we're laughing and joking and telling old stories and stuff. And he's well today, and we're arranging another visit. But we do that. You do that, right? You guys have done probably all of those things that I just talked about. You've went, and when someone has passed away, and went to be with the family and comfort them. Someone's been in the hospital. You've went and been near them and supplied their needs and taken care of them. Or someone that maybe the end of life is coming, you've been there to be with them. We do that. That's what we do. Today we're going to look at an instance where Jesus did something very similar to that. And it's where he says, I am the resurrection and the life. I know there are people here today that have experienced the same thing I just talked about. And when you've had great faith, when you found yourself in one of these times of trouble, when someone maybe had a disease, or there was disappointment, or prayers weren't answered, or there was a death facing maybe you, and you're here today because of a miracle, or someone in your family, had great faith to go and minister to them. So let me ask you this. How is your faith today? Especially if you're in a time of trouble. How's your faith today? Hopefully it's strong. Hopefully it's not fragile. And then how's your faith today if the world is going right? It seems like many times when everything's going right in our life, our faith becomes less. But it's things that happen that trouble us sometimes where our faith increases and we go to God quicker. That should be the same in both instances. I would hope that our faith is strong no matter what's going on in your life. If it's good, your faith is strong. If it's bad, your faith is strong. If it's ugly, your faith is strong. It should not be waning when things are going good. But we should have a rock-solid faith. Our faith should not be fragile. It should be strong. So today we're going to take a look at an I am statement that Jesus said, which comforted someone. I'd already read it once, Martha and Mary. It's an event that strengthened the faith of those that witnessed it. And it's an event that's in the Bible that strengthens our faith as well when we hear this story 2,000 years later, that we can have faith in that. And this is who Jesus says he is in John chapter 11. He says, I am the resurrection and the life. Look at the comfort in that. There is life in me. All of these I am statements are talking about believing in him and having life. And here he says to Martha, I am the resurrection and life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. And then Jesus says this, do you believe this? Do you believe this? I believe this. I hope you do too. Let that sink in for a moment what that means. Jesus is the resurrection and the life. He came down and laid down his life so that we can live and have abundant life. We just celebrated communion where we remember that awesome sacrifice that he did for us. So now get out your Bibles, if you would. Turn to John chapter 11 or your iPad or your phone or however it is you look at the Bible these days. We're going to spend a little time in John chapter 11 and unpack this scene that's going on here in John chapter 11. It says this. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. We've talked about people being sick. He was from Bethany, which is about a few miles east of Jerusalem, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary was whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So you've heard of this lady before. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. Hey, Lazarus is sick. We know you love him. You need to know this. They send word. When he heard this, Jesus said, this sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed there 2 more days, and then he said to his disciples, let's go back to Judea. That seemed a little awkward, like, well, why do you stay 2 more days? Well, for one, by the time he got the message, and he knew this, Lazarus was already dead. They sent word that he was sick. It took the guy about a day to get there because Jesus was about 20 miles away. So the messenger gets there the first day, and Jesus gets the word, and Lazarus dies that day. The messenger returns the next day to tell Martha and Mary that the message was delivered. Jesus waits another day, then departs, and he gets there on the 4th day. Because we're going to know that that Lazarus was in the tomb for 4 days. They say that here in a moment. But see, Jesus was on a divine schedule. He was not on the schedule of those around there. He knew what God wanted him to do. He already said God's going to be glorified through this sickness. It will not end in death. What a beautiful promise there, too. So check out this. This is what the disciples say next. And this is where we see some fragile faith with the disciples. The disciples say this, but Rabbi, a short while ago, the Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you are going back. They'd already tried to kill him once there. Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see by the world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light. He's basically telling them, I'm the light. We have daylight, but walk with me. Come with me. After he had said this, he went on to tell them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up. His disciples replied, they're still trying to get out of going to Judea. They don't want to go. Lord, if he sleeps, he'll get better. They're thinking about just real sleep. Jesus is actually talking about being dead. Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought they meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. You know, sometimes we might say someone passed away or they're not going to be with us much longer, but we don't often say they're dead. But Jesus here said he's dead. Lazarus is dead. And for your sake, look at what he says here. And for your sake, I am glad I was not there so that you may believe. But let us go to him, because he's going to go demonstrate a great miracle to them, and they're going to believe after this. And then Thomas, also known as Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, and I think this is kind of fragile in a way also, he says, let's also go that we may die with him. Like, yep, we're going to go with him. They tried to kill him last time he was there, and we'll go there too, and well, if we die with him. So we can look at that statement a couple different ways. For one, the disciples are afraid to return to Judea because they know they tried to kill Jesus the last time. I believe their faith is fragile in this respect. Jesus said to them about the daylight, walking in the daylight in the dark. Come with me. Jesus knows what he's doing. He said he's the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, and will have the light of life. So they're not remembering this. They're not remembering who they're with. It doesn't matter if it's day or night. They're not going to stumble because they're with the light of the world. And remember, we said that a few weeks ago, and the disciples don't remember it now. Do you remember that? Are you getting that today? Are we getting it? And do we believe that Jesus is the light of the world and that he's the resurrection and the life? So let me ask you, how's your faith? Is it strong or is it fragile? And that statement that Thomas said, let us go so that we may die with him, it could be looked at as having great faith. Like, okay, we're going to go down there, and if we die, we die, and Jesus will bring us back. That's one way to look at it. Or they're going down there for a great cause that's worth dying for. If they die to go save Lazarus, okay, so be it. But I think it's also this, that it's they're not getting what's going on. Their faith is fragile, and they're afraid to go down there for fear of dying. They're not getting it once again. They still don't get it. And let me ask you, are you getting it? Are we getting that we have to have faith in Jesus as the resurrection and the life, the light of the world? Jesus knows what he's doing, but the disciples are following him. But they're following him with a fragile faith because they don't understand what's about to happen. Then the story goes on. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in their loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, and here's the statement, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that now God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha answered, I know he'll rise again in the resurrection in the last day. They believed in a resurrection, but she's not understanding what's about to really happen. And look here, many of Martha's friends had came there to comfort her. They knew her brother had passed, and we do the same thing. I talked about my experiences that. We gather for others when there's a time of loss. But we also see here Martha's faith is fragile, but maybe a little stronger than the disciples. Because look at what she said. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. I think she believes there's a glimmer of hope that either Lazarus will be restored or somehow she will be comforted in some way. And then Jesus told her that her brother would rise again, and she believed that it was true, but not really in the manner that was about to happen. And then Jesus comforts her with this next I am statement. When he says, I am, ergo eimi, God, the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? And I think that's applicable to us today. We need to say, yes, I believe that. I believe that, and I hope you do too. And she replies, yes, Lord, she replied, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who has come into the world. After she said this, she went back to call her sister Mary aside. The teacher is here, she said, and is asking for you. When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. So she doesn't know this resurrection statement yet. When Jesus saw her weeping, the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. Jesus wept. You've heard that statement as being the shortest verse in the Bible. But what a great compassion we see the Lord having. He understood mourning with those who mourn. He knew he could bring him back. But he was also moved that these folks are troubled too. When I've been to funerals in the past, maybe someone I didn't even know that well, I mourn with those folks. Maybe you have too. I may not even have known them or been that close to them, but when I see other people missing that loved one, it moves me. And I shed tears. And I cry with them. And I mourn with them. And you've probably done the same thing. How beautiful it is that in this instance we see the Lord, the Son of God, God incarnate, moved to cry. Jesus wept. He mourned with them. Then the Jews said, see how he loved him? But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man, have kept this man from dying. They don't know that Jesus earlier had said, it's not going to end in death, but God's going to get the glory out of this. But Jesus wept. He mourned with those that mourned. Paul tells us in Romans chapter 12, rejoice with those who rejoice. We love doing that, celebrating with people. But he also says, mourn with those who mourn. It's our duty, I believe, to do that, to go be with people and comfort them. I always not worry, but I'm always thinking about when I've been to a funeral and the widow or the widower goes home and they have family around them for a while. Then there comes that day when they're by themselves again. And it might really hit them hard that they lost someone. That's when we really need to be there and mourning with those people to help them through this transition. But we are to rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn. I mourn when I see others mourning, and I would guess you do the same. It's our nature to do that. Then Jesus says this. Jesus, once more, deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. He said, take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there is a bad odor, for he's been there 4 days. He's been dead for 4 days. They did not embalm people and do those things back then. They're thinking he's decaying and it's going to stink when he opens the door. Then Jesus says, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. Can you imagine seeing that? Well, how would your faith be after seeing someone you knew was dead in the tomb for 4 days, walk out alive, still wearing the grave clothes, and Jesus say, take the clothes off, let him go. He lives. And we know later other people come to see Lazarus because they've heard about this happen. You can't keep it a secret. This is one of the greatest miracles that Jesus ever performed. An event where we see our fragile faith of the disciples strengthened. An event where we see Martha's faith and we understand that Jesus is the Son of God and can do anything. A miracle that would have strengthened the faith of all that saw it that day. Think about how many people knew that. It was no secret that Lazarus was dead. And now when they see him alive again, how many people are going to ask, how did this happen? And they're going to hear this story even if they didn't see it. A miracle that would have strengthened the faith of all who saw it, especially the disciples who still had some doubts. They still had to be encouraged to have a strong faith. A miracle that brought back Jesus' good friend. He was friends with Lazarus. They said he loved him. A miracle that could not be kept secret. If you go ahead to John chapter 12, we learn about people coming back to Bethany to talk to Lazarus, to ask about this. John 12 says, meanwhile, a large crowd of Jews found out that Jesus was there back in Bethany and came not only because of him, but look at this, but also to see Lazarus, who he had raised from the dead. People came to see this. So and look at what the chief priests do. The chief priests made plans to kill Lazarus as well, which I think that's kind of interesting. He's walked out of the grave once. Could he not walk out again? Jesus could bring him back again. What are they thinking? But they wanted to kill Jesus and they wanted to kill Lazarus as well. Look at this, for on account of him, many of the Jews were going over to Jesus, and look what they were doing. They were believing in him. Do you believe in him? I mean, look at this. This is an awesome miracle we have recorded for us to strengthen our faith. A miracle that comfort those who are mourning the loss of their friend and their brother. They got him back. A miracle that strengthens our faith all these years later. An I am statement that comforts us. An I am statement that says, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. And this is fact that you can take to the bank. You can believe this. Do you believe this? I do. And I hope you do too. It comforts me. And if you don't believe this, let me ask you this right now. Will you believe this? Will you decide today to believe? I'm telling you, this is in the scriptures. It's been disputed, but it's never been disproved. This happened. It's in the Bible. We know that Jesus is the bread of life that came down from heaven to give us life. I believe that. To get this bread, Jesus said, all we have to do is believe. That's what he said. Do you believe? We know that Jesus is the light of the world. In him is light and life. I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. What another beautiful promise. What an awesome light to follow. We also know that Jesus is the gate, and all who enter will be saved. We know that Jesus is the good shepherd, and that the good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep so that we can have life. We're the sheep. He laid down his life for us that we can have life abundantly. And now we know that Jesus is the resurrection and the life. Can call a dead man out of the grave. If he can do it for Lazarus, he can do it for us. We're promised life after this life. We know that Jesus is the resurrection and the life. And look at this. And he proved it, not only by raising his friend Lazarus from the dead, but Jesus himself would walk out of the grave, leaving his grave clothes behind. Look at what John tells us in John chapter 20. So Peter and the other disciple, which that's John, started for the tomb. Both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter. He's bragging on himself there. He beat him there. Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent over and looked in at the strips of linen lying there, but did not go in. Then Simon Peter came along behind him and went straight into the tomb. He saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head. The cloth was still lying in its place, separate from the linen. Finally, the other disciple, who had reached the tomb first, also went inside. And look what he did. He saw and he believed. The tomb was empty. Jesus walked out of that tomb alive, left his grave clothes in there, and walked out of that tomb alive, conquering death once and for all, that we can have resurrection and life. So today, no matter what is going on in your life, no matter what it is, be it a disease that's causing you grief and trouble, put it in God's hands. He's the resurrection. Maybe it's disappointment, something in life is not working out the way it should be. Put it in God's hands. He's the resurrection and the life, the good shepherd that lays down his life for us. Maybe you're struggling with prayers that are being delayed in answering, because God answers every prayer. It's either yes, no, or wait. And maybe you're in that season of waiting for a prayer to be answered. Don't give up. Don't have a fragile faith. Have a strong faith and give it to God. And maybe you're looking at death, maybe your own death. We all are, but maybe you know something about yours that's troubling you. Don't worry. Jesus is the resurrection and the life. Or maybe one of your family members or a friend has had some trouble and you know time is near. But love them and comfort them and know that Jesus is the resurrection and the life, and minister to them in that way. Or maybe you're struggling to just believe. Maybe you're hearing this for the first time, and man, I want to believe, but I don't know. Maybe you're struggling with that. But let me say this. Will you at least take a chance? Just take that chance right now and put your faith in Jesus, the resurrection and the life. How beautiful is that? Just take that chance. I plead with you to do that. Martha and Mary had lost hope that they would ever see their brother again. But they sent word to Jesus. They had some faith that he could do something. But Jesus comforted them with that great statement, I am the resurrection and the life. And he gave them their brother back. And they enjoyed more time with him. So if you have lost hope, believe in him. That's what we keep saying. Just believe. Believe in that he is the I am, God with us, the bread of life, the light of the world, the gate, the shepherd, the resurrection, and the life. It's that simple. So do you believe? I believe. If you don't believe and you're still struggling with that, don't leave here today without talking to me, or I can get you someone else to talk to. Don't leave here today without putting your faith and your hope and your trust in Jesus, the Son of God, who came down from heaven, the bread of life, to give us life, life abundantly, the good shepherd that takes care of us, the resurrection and life that conquered death. That's what's at stake. So today, don't leave here without accepting Jesus as your Savior, repenting of your sins, which just means turning around from the old ways and letting God be in charge in your life. You're probably going to sin again. We all do, but we're more conscious of it now, and we're forgiven, and we can go to God and strive to live a better life, and then be buried in that watery grave of baptism, to walk a new life in Him forever and ever, and have the Holy Spirit dwell within your body, that great, wonderful counselor that'll help you the rest of your life to live a great Christian life. That's what's at stake today. So don't leave here today without taking that next step, asking me about it, or I can get you to someone else if you want to talk to someone besides me. Let me pray for you. Our Father in heaven, we thank you so much for this day, and thank you for this message that we have in the Bible, where Jesus goes and comforts Mary and Martha and calls his good friend out of the grave. What a miracle that speaks to us, Father, that we have that same promise, that Jesus is the resurrection and the life for us too, that we need not fear death, but live life and live it to the full. Father, forgive us where we fall short. In Jesus' name.